Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so as you heard in the intro, this is what we're working with. We're at 106 BPM, which is important here because I find for these style of beats that Kaytranada does, um, he tends to be like in the like 100 to like 110 or 115 BPM range. And obviously this isn't the limit of what he does. He's done a lot of other stuff and a lot of unique things. But as far as these style of beats that people tend to know him for, um, yeah, like around this speed is pretty good. First thing I'm gonna go into is this clap, and I want to explain the technique that I used. It's 4 layers, but really sort of 2 layers. Because if you see, I grouped these three together, and I'm just sort of using them as one. So it's that, and then that. So the first thing that I did here is I basically recorded myself clapping into my mic, like literally this mic that I'm talking into right now. I just went and like recorded a bunch of different claps. If I drag out this file, you'll see there's like a bunch of them in there. And basically what I did was I took them and put them on separate tracks. And I used a little fade on them just because there's a little bit of room noise in the background. It's not the best recording ever. And then I took 2 of them and panned them, one completely to the left, one completely to the right, and then put one straight down the center. And then I sort of stacked them in this way where they're not all on the same beat. So it sort of replicates like what you would get if you had a group of people, of 3 people clapping, and they were sort of like in different areas of the room. You would never perfectly clap at the same time. It's always sort of off. So this was sort of my way of recreating that, because I didn't have a group of people to record. And you can record these in a lot of different ways. I mean, you can use like your iPhone or your phone mic or whatever. You can use like, I mean, pretty much anything, because it doesn't need to be a super high quality recording. I mean, obviously this isn't the best clap recording of all time, but it's more sort of how you use it. And all I did to those as a group was I just put a little high pass filter on them, because if you listen without it, there's like a little bit of low end. It just was kind of nasty. Like I said, not the best recording, but I did it. So this is just a very straightforward clap. There's really nothing I did to that. I think I converted it to mono because it was in stereo. Or yeah, it had like some kind of weird phasing going on. But if you hear these together, like if you hear this on its own in the beat, it sounded a little too bland. But if I add these on top of it, it's very subtle, but it adds that nice little like stereo high end that I like in my claps. And another thing that I want to talk about on these before I move forward is that none of these, I guess this one hits on the beat, but none of these hit like perfectly on the beat. And that's pretty important. You don't necessarily want these to be like perfectly on the 2 and the 4. You want them to be sort of off. So that's what I did here by moving all of these around to different areas. And yeah, going on with that, the hi-hats definitely illustrate that point pretty well as well, because if you hear them, they're not really on any type of beat. Like, I mean, they're obviously like their own thing, but the idea here is that you do sort of want to adhere to the grid. Obviously, you know, this is a 2-bar pattern, but you want to move them around within that like 2 or 4 or 1-bar pattern, however long you have it, in such a way that they're not perfectly on the grid, but when it restarts, it feels like a loop. And so that's what I sort of did here. If you see, a lot of these are off the grid, but when it starts over fine. It doesn't like sound weird. It doesn't feel like it's speeding up or slowing down. But yeah, something that I notice he does a lot is he has these hi-hats where they're very off the beat and like very, very swung. So I wanted to try to replicate that or recreate that, I guess. And yeah, so that's pretty much the programming for that. As far as the sound, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. He's obviously used a few different things. But I wanted to try and recreate those really good live hi-hats that he always uses. So what I did was I took addictive drums. I'll open it up and show you if it'll load. So what addictive drums is it's this plugin that has like live drum sounds, like multi-sample live drums. Multi-sampled meaning it's never the same sample twice. Let me see. You hear that changes every time, sort of. It's supposed to like really perfectly replicate like a live drummer, or at least a live drum kit. What I did was I went in these like retro bundle, I guess, drums that they have in here. And they have these like really good hi-hats. Sort of as you play up the keyboard, it opens up the hi-hat more and more. So I just took a few of those and I took them into a drum rack. Because I wanted this to be everybody to be able to use this project file, but also because there's actually something in the drum rack that is very useful for these. If you listen, oh, I got a solo. Whoops. Oh, it messed up. Hang on. Okay, so if you hear that, what happens is when this open hi-hat plays, it plays, but as soon as this starts, it closes. Now, that's important because like if you're playing like live drums, you can never, when you play the hi-hat, you like have the pedal, it opens and closes it. So like a lot of times that's how you would play like live drums, right? You would do like you would play the open hi-hat, but then you would close it pretty quickly after with like the beat. So the way you can recreate that with Ableton is they have these chokes. And what these do is basically you set them, and when you play like another pad on the drum rack, it'll stop that sample. That's sort of the idea there. And I noticed Kaytranada does that a lot. He has like these loops of hi-hats that maybe he samples them, maybe he's doing them with addictive drums. I don't know, but they're very realistic like that. He does like those really quick open hi-hats that close immediately. Like that. Now the only other thing I did in terms of sound design here is I put a bit warmer on all of them. Of course, had to do that just to sort of like make everything a little bit fatter and a little bit more saturated, I guess. A bit warmer. And what I also did was I made this hi-hat. I didn't originally take that out of addictive drums. What happened was this loop sounded kind of boring because I had this open hi-hat playing the notes this one has right now. But it just sounded a little too repetitive, so I took this one, and what I did was I warped it on Complex Pro, which means when I move the pitch, it's doing like formant shifting, I guess as well as pitch shifting. So I moved that down -7, and that just gave it like a cool little texture, to be in there, and add a little bit more variation, because if you just use like 2 or 3 sounds, these loops can get kind of boring. But if you sort of make variations like that, and little small details, you can keep it interesting. The only other thing I did to that was I put the track delay on and just moved it up 21 milliseconds. So the way you do that is this D down here on the like right side of Ableton. When you open that up, it opens up this track delay. And what track delay does is it's literally the same thing as just going like this, moving your track forward however many milliseconds, or your MIDI clip or audio file or whatever. But it's a little bit easier to mess with it if you just have it here as like a value you can change. So I moved that forward a little bit because if you listen to it with the kick, you hear how the kick and the hi-hat aren't like perfectly together on that first one. Like if I turn this off, they're perfectly together and it sounded kind of weird. But this feels more like realistic to me, having it move forward just a tiny bit. Because, like, if you're a live drummer, like I was saying before about the open hi-hat thing, well, you got to think about that with this, too. It's like, a live drummer isn't ever going to perfectly hit 2 drums exactly at the same time. Like, that just by, like, human, I guess, humans playing an instrument, that's just not possible. So I wanted to recreate that as much as possible in here, and that's the purpose of that track delay. Now, other than that, we just have the kick, which is pretty straightforward. You just want to use sort of like hip-hop, like trap kind of kicks. And yeah, I made my own by layering 2 samples together. Basically, I started with this one and this one. And then I just filtered out. If you hear this one, I didn't really like the low end. And there wasn't really a good high end on this sample. So I took the low end out of this one and you just get the good high end from that one. And I took the high end out of this one, and you just get the low end from it. And then I just put them together. And there you go. You have your own kick. And it's cool too because I think this is a little bit stereo, this high layer. But this low layer is very down the center and not very mono. So you can have kind of a cool effect there because obviously you don't want your low end stuff to be in mono or in stereo. And I think it was a little bit on the original low end on this sample. But yeah, like I said, as far as like finding samples for these kind of kicks, you really just want to look at like sort of like trap and hip hop type of drums. That's really where he gets a lot of his sort of flair from when it comes to his drums. And yeah, the only other thing I want to talk about with that is that I did move the 2 and the 4, as in like if you count this out, like 1, 2, 3, 4. I moved the 2 and the 4 forward just a slight bit. If you see, this is like perfectly on the beat, so those are moved forward a little bit, and that just sort of again just sort of makes it more human. And that's a pretty popular thing to do with these kind of beats. It just sort of gives it like that sort of push-pull kind of feel that's become very popular. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for today. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Make sure to download the samples in the description and check out my Bandcamp as well down there. You can get some samples. I have sample packs in there. But yeah, peace, guys.